Extraterrestrial mimics are aggressively remodeling Europe, while humanity proudly celebrates a single, lonely victory in Verdun. Rita Vratoski strapped on untested robotic armor and decimated hundreds of aliens, making the rest of the military look entirely incompetent. The brass plans massive Operation Downfall, enlisting ruggedly handsome PR representative Major Cage, who is blissfully napping toward his doom. Cage struts into headquarters to meet General Brigham, entirely oblivious that his cushy office job is about to tragically evaporate. Cage cowardly suggests blaming Brigham for impending casualties, earning himself a highly non-optional front-row ticket to the beach invasion. Cage pathetically cites his profound blood phobia to decline, but Brigham is completely unimpressed by this majestic display of cowardice. In a top-tier tactical blunder, Cage attempts to casually blackmail the general right to his immensely powerful face. Brigham simply arrests him. Cage bolts like a startled gazelle, gets promptly tasered, and wakes up handcuffed at Heathrow. Cage eloquently whines to Sergeant Farrell, who amusingly dismisses his elite complaining as the aftermath of a wild poker night. Desperate Cage uses pure logic to beg for a phone, but the mustachioed Farrell masterfully ignores his tears. Farrell gleefully introduces deserter Cage to the barracks, expertly ensuring absolutely everyone utterly despises the newcomer immediately. Farrell proudly spouts philosophical drivel about fiery battle crucibles, handing Cage over to J-Squad's deeply hostile misfit soldiers. Farrell mandates Cage be combat ready by dawn, and the squad kindly welcomes him by forcing him to literally eat playing cards. Dawn breaks. A clueless Cage intensely fumbles his exosuit while Rita confidently struts past wielding a massive, glorious sword. Rita brutally punches an awestruck fanboy while a severely nauseated Cage tries lumbering away, only to get violently dragged back. Troops load into swarming dropships, and Cage absolutely panics upon realizing his hand-me-down suit already contains a dead guy's blood. Cage helplessly begs for a weapon safety tutorial right before his dropship violently explodes, sending him plummeting to the beach. Welcome to the slaughterhouse. Kimmel is instantly crushed, while Cage stumbles around with a hilariously useless Japanese user interface. Through the thick smoke, Cage watches in awe as Rita elegantly vaporizes mimics like an absolute boss on the battlefield. Rita's majestic hero moment ends abruptly when a fiery missile blasts her dead, right next to a completely traumatized Cage. A mimic violently massacres J-Squad until Cage miraculously shoots it, only to immediately face an enormous, intimidating bluish alpha. Armed purely with panic, Cage detonates a claymore, dying while simultaneously swallowing a mouthful of highly corrosive alpha blood. Cage miraculously gasps awake at Heathrow, getting kicked by Farrell again in a deeply confusing military edition of Groundhog Day. Enduring the same tedious lecture, a clueless Cage fumbles his weapon safety once more as the doomed beach drop approaches. The dropship reliably explodes. Cage lands gracefully on his knees, yet still completely fails to save Kimmel from getting crushed. Cage heroically jumps on Rita to save her. She coldly steals his battery and completely abandons him to die. Wake up! Get kicked! Cage tries employing logic and clairvoyance, earning himself a lovely aggressive dragging back to the barracks. He flawlessly predicts J-Squad's secrets to prove his foresight. They respond to his helpful warnings by duct-taping his mouth shut. Cage hilariously dies saving Kimmel, dies dodging massive dropships, and eventually reaches Rita to aggressively suggest they flee the beach. Cage effortlessly slaughters mimics like a pro. Thoroughly impressed, Rita delivers a cryptic order: "Find me when you wake up." Reset. Cage perfectly skips Farrell's lecture, cheerfully agreeing to comply and leaving the tough sergeant profoundly and utterly confused. During morning PT, Cage flawlessly rolls under a passing truck, executing a masterful, highly dangerous tactical retreat from his platoon. After painful trial and error, he successfully sneaks past the live firing range, effortlessly infiltrating Rita's highly restricted private training arena. Cage rudely interrupts Rita's push-ups, proudly quoting her own words back to her to avoid a permanent psych ward vacation. Cage confirms bathing in bluish alpha blood. Rita drops the bombshell that this exact temporal nonsense happened to her previously. Rita drags him to a gloomy basement where Cage proves his time-looping credentials to Dr. Carter using cheap parlor tricks. Carter explains the mimics are one organism. The alphas are simply the nervous system, while the omega is the brain. The omega resets time upon defeat. Operation Downfall isn't humanity's endgame, but a perfectly evolved, meat-grinding cosmic trap. Cage accidentally hijacked the reset button. Now he must die daily until he locates and destroys the glowing Omega brain. Cage naively suggests a PowerPoint pitch for the general. Rita swiftly shuts it down, warning him about impending Omega visions. Cage happily figures he's just the map guy, but Rita forces him into a brutally painful, bone-crunching combat training montage. The golden rule: field injuries mean permanent power loss. Rita cheerfully demonstrates her commitment to this by shooting him dead. Desperate Cage suggests transferring the power via sex. Rita coldly confirms she already tried that monumental, highly disappointing failure. After endless brutal beatings, a crippled Cage finally receives a vision. A concrete German dam featuring a helpful warning sign. Carter easily locates the Alpine Dam. Now they merely have to survive an entirely impossible, alien-infested slaughter on the beach. The beach becomes a relentless trial-and-error nightmare. No matter Cage's precise choreography, Rita gets repeatedly and unceremoniously dismantled. Micromanaging completely fails. Rita continuously dies in the sand, leaving Cage to miserably stare at her lifeless corpse over and over. With his morale utterly shattered, Cage effortlessly dodges J-Squad's ambush blindfolded, deeply baffling his hostile teammates before walking away. Cage skips the unwinnable war entirely for a deserted London pub, enjoying a highly depressing pint with some rambling locals. Mimics inevitably flood the Thames, violently ruining his vacation. Cage furiously returns to violently dismantling mechanical training targets. Cage dramatically declares escaping the beach is fundamentally impossible, but Rita's sheer stubbornness forcefully drags him right back to the fight. They miraculously conquer the beach. The grand new plan? Steal a working minivan from a heavily infested, run-down caravan park. Cage explicitly warns Rita to unhook the caravan. Naturally, she frantically speeds off with the bulky dead weight fully attached. A massive mimic bursts directly from the attached caravan, forcing Cage to violently blast the beast with golden flames. Cruising in the minivan, Cage flexes his creepy clairvoyance by reciting Rita's intimate Lion family vacation stories to prove his loops. Rita stubbornly refuses to bond. Cage sadly admits watching her die 300 times before their vehicle humiliatingly runs completely out of gas. Entirely out of fuel, they wisely abandon the useless van and trek to an isolated, dust-covered farmhouse for bleak shelter. Rita uncovers a helicopter. Cage suddenly develops a highly suspicious fear of flying, secretly spotting her severe, fatal shoulder wound. Cage pleasantly suggests wine and rest. Rita, apparently allergic to relaxation, vastly prefers taking a bullet to cleanly reset reality. Cage flawlessly prepares her coffee. Rita horrifyingly realizes he's purposely stalling to delay her entirely inevitable grisly death. Cage confesses a buried mimic will absolutely destroy the chopper. He is merely trying to buy her a few extra minutes. Cage emotionally begs her to hide. Stubborn Rita marches straight out and turns the doomed helicopter's ignition key anyway. The buried mimic predictably wrecks the chopper. Cage furiously hacks it to death, tenderly holding Rita's hand as she perishes. Reset. A completely heartbroken Cage goes full lone wolf, respectfully dismissing Rita and leaving her utterly and profoundly baffled. Cage carelessly drops into combat without a helmet, marching like an absolute lunatic and coldly letting Kimmel get crushed. Cage successfully flies solo to the creepy German dam, dropping flares into a deeply dark, perfect alien horror movie setting. It's a massive trap. An enormous alpha refuses to kill him, clearly aiming to drain his precious reset power instead. The alpha maliciously bleeds him. Realizing he's about to lose his ultimate cheat code, Cage forces a reset by intentionally drowning. Cage reveals the dam was a decoy. Carter casually mentions a magical tracking transponder conveniently locked inside heavily guarded Whitehall. Cage and Rita flawlessly dodge Whitehall security, casually marching in and pointing a loaded gun directly at General Brigham's head. Cage brilliantly flexes his time looping by perfectly predicting phone calls, delivering the ultimate grim "I told you so" regarding the war. Cage thoroughly embarrasses Brigham by predicting the secretary's entrance and exposing his highly secret, cowardly Australian nepotism scheme. Cage confidently demands the transponder, forcefully insisting Brigham's stubborn meat grinder tactics will absolutely and unequivocally lose the entire global war. Brigham finally cracks and surrenders the device. Stepping outside, Cage is immediately and unsurprisingly ambushed by heavily armed military guards. Rita violently stabs the transponder directly into Cage's thigh. His eyes go black as he vividly envisions the Omega under the Louvre. An exosuit abruptly halts their escape. Cage wakes up painfully restrained, receiving the worst news imaginable: a healthy blood transfusion. Cage violently tips his hospital bed over. Rita frees him just as he confirms he's officially and permanently lost the reset power. With mere hours until the guaranteed slaughter, they desperately need a hijacked dropship and a highly suicidal squad of soldiers. Cage magically recruits J-Squad by aggressively and beautifully blackmailing the entire group with their deepest, darkest hidden secrets. He brutally promises an absolute massacre, but J-Squad blindly agrees to follow the legendary Angel of Verdun into chaos anyway. Farrell passionately preaches to an empty room while J-Squad successfully hijacks a dropship straight over the illuminated Eiffel Tower. Cage issues an incredibly stressful rule: do not kill alphas. Otherwise, a catastrophic reset erases this timeline forever. Alien missiles brutally batter the dropship. Cage forgets to hook his deployment wire and hilariously plummets into deep flooded Paris. Cage dramatically drags himself out of the murky water, painfully limping through the fiery post-apocalyptic ruins toward the wrecked dropship. He locates his heavily injured squad. His clairvoyant free trial has officially expired, leaving them completely flying blind into darkness. Brilliant tactical plan. Use a wingless chopper as a metal jet ski while J-Squad selflessly volunteers to stay behind and die. Skinner and Griff lay down desperate cover fire. A strategically blasted fuel tank sends charging mimics gloriously flying into the air. Ford dies heroically. Meanwhile, Cage and Rita tear through the water, frantically blasting aggressive tentacles, ripping their damaged chopper apart. They spectacularly crash the chopper straight through the Louvre's glass pyramid, tossing Cage from the wreckage like a human ragdoll. Racing through the dark, flooded interior, they expertly dodge falling rubble and stare into the watery abyss hiding the Omega. A massive alpha spots them. Rita passionately kisses Cage, then sprints off to knowingly die just to buy him precious time. The terrifying alpha ruthlessly devours Rita, then chases Cage deep into the cavernous underwater space housing the glowing Omega brain. The alpha fatally impales Cage, but he strategically drops armed grenades directly into the Omega, causing a glorious, world-saving explosion. A dead Cage reabsorbs alpha blood and miraculously wakes up pre-meeting, joyfully hearing news of the enemy's total, inexplicable collapse. Humanity basically wins. Cage casually walks through the military base, secretly remembering hundreds of brutal deaths no one else recalls. Cage finds an entirely oblivious Rita executing her signature push-ups, gazing at her affectionately with a massive, knowing grin.